Good morning and welcome to another episode of ASAP, your Afrikan Social Activism Playbook. I am one of your hosts, T. Jamal, joined as always by my lovely sister, Michelee. How you doing today, sis?
Hey, brother, I'm doing really well today. I feel good. I had my lunch and everything. I'm, nice and energized for the day. Well, my day is like halfway over right now, so I'm doing pretty good though. Feeling nice, considering like
Yeah,
in higher spirits. After just the new news that we have coming in.
right. So, like we said on Friday,
How about you feeling?
we were going to be back. I'm doing well, and I'm just, like I said on Friday, excited to get to work. Now that the large part of the federal elections are over, we can now shift our focus onto the work that's on us as the constituents to make sure that we hold the people accountable, to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. And we have to make sure that we create our own agenda. And we'll get a little bit more into that, as we continue and go out through the show. But this is pretty much going to be the theme of the week. This episode and all week's episode is called What Now?
Yeah. Where do we go from here?
We so-called won the election. The people that a lot of us voted for, they won. But there's still work to do. Like I said, this is not the end of the road. This is not time to sit down with our arms folded or to sit on our hands. This is time to actually go into what is the plan? Okay, how do we enact it? What is our agenda? And I want to put something on the screen just so we don't forget that this is still happening. We can't forget the names of the people who we've been fighting for. And
Right.
these cases aren't over. Like, we still don't have justice for, like, standardized justice. No one has gone to court. No one has been convicted for Ahmaud Arbery, for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for Jacob Blake, for any of these people. And while we were away, it has happened more.
Right.
So there is still work for us to do, especially in the Black community. So we cannot just celebrate this. I'm excited because of the potential of the work that we want to do actually being done, not so much so
Right.
about the specific candidates. I'm excited about my upcoming work, about our upcoming work. And I hope that everyone's excitement is in that same vein and not overly celebrating symbolism. Because I think that's where we fell off with President Obama. We were so enamored by the symbolism of a Black president, we didn't do much beyond that as the people
And
to support him.
Yeah, I'd also say that we didn't understand, a lot of us, like a great deal of us, did not even understand the process, and that's why a lot of the blame or the lack of respect came from when it came to President Obama, because people just expected to just see a Black person in office, in the highest office, and everything is supposed to be done for Black people. And that's just not the case. Like, that's not ever the case. We are the puppeteers and they are the puppets. They are the public servants. And it's our job to, hold them accountable and to present things to them, right, for them to, to do. And so that, yeah, I think it was just a lot of misunderstanding, or just a lack of understanding, actually, just for the whole political process in the first place. I can't hear you, bro.
Like we've said before, and
Yeah.
are going to continue to say, that's not unintentional. The fact that we didn't know, the fact that we didn't know how the system worked,
Right.
is not unintentional. If we know the rules of the
Right.
game and we know how to leverage it to our advantage, then we start winning. Then we start flipping things in our favor. Because even though the numbers change based on the percentages of Black people in the United States, whether it's 12.5%, 13%, 14%, even though we are a percentage and numerical minority, we still make an impact in what happens here. We make impact in the economy. We make an impact in commerce and our buying power, which is why people are always, companies are selling products to us specifically targeted to us.
Right.
These political parties are specifically campaigning to us. That's because they understand the value of what we can bring to the table. But we can't just rest there. We have to understand it and understand how to use that to our advantage. So we're gonna move into the
Definitely.
first section of the show and just go on to I want to go to the highlight reel because I feel like our beginning discussion was both a check-in and a straight truth no chaser, just about the importance of the vote.
Right.
So
Right.
our highlight reel today is Stacey Abrams. So Michelee, start off by telling the people about Stacey Abrams and why we're highlighting someone who is, still currently active present day. What is her significance?
Right. Yeah. So Sister Stacey, my goodness, a dynamic woman. She was a Spelman grad, actually, shout out to Atlanta. But a lot of people know her more recently of running for governor in 2018, and she was cheated out of that, and she got really close to actually getting it, and she was cheating out of it due to voter suppression. And so she actually organized. She set, obviously stunned from that moment of losing that election to as governor, and she didn't stay mad for long though. She really got to work and she started organizing. She really to go after voter suppression, because obviously, like you can't stifle the people when they want to speak and they want something. People wanted her. They stood up and they spoke up. They used their votes, used their voices, and they were not heard, and it just wasn't right. And so she created several organizations and just really got behind voter registration, and she pushed and pushed, and really, I mean, it's amazing what she was able to do. Luckily, the state of Georgia went blue, like you pointed out on Friday. After so many years, it's like nobody saw that. A lot of us in our generation, we never even saw it and didn't think it was possible. And so she was able. That was a woman who was behind a lot of that. Of course, there were other organizations and other leaders. People pushing for voter registration and participation in that, but she was a big motivator. And I mean, this woman, she has a lot owed to her by this party, and I'm telling you, like, they better give her anything, any position, that she want to take. Don't just give her little, don't just put her name up there. She actually deserves a lot. She put in that work.
So, and to bring it a little bit more into context, I remember when I first heard of Stacey Abrams, I was applying for a job and I was flipping through my phone and it was like, there are two Stacys running for governor under, in the primaries for the Democratic Party. So, no, I heard there was a black woman running for governor in Georgia, and her name was Stacey. So I looked up, you know, black woman running for governor, and then I saw there were two women running against each other in the Democratic primaries for the Georgia governorship, both named Stacey, and I just felt that was kind of odd, and put there purposely to confuse people.
Right.
Some people might not look all the way into it. And because both of them are Democrat, some people might just show up on election day and vote for either Stacey. Even their last names were kind of similar. And I don't even remember the other lady off the top of my head. But the other one was a white woman. And I was like, is this some type of trick the Democrats are playing? Like, why would they, do that? It just felt kind of funny. And then, as she won the primary and went to the general election, she ran against Brian Kemp, who was the Secretary of State of Georgia already, who that office controls who gets to register to vote. He controls the polling places. That office controls so much to do with voting and election day that it seemed like a very clear conflict of interest to have that person still be in power in that same position as they are running for another office. Either as you launch your campaign, if you're Secretary of State, you have to, unyield some of that power or step down completely as you enter your campaign or whatever, but you should not be able to control voter registration and polling places as you are currently running for office in the state that somewhat govern already. And there was already some fishiness around that. But like you said, we talk about champions a lot on this show, and the fact that she lost and didn't throw herself a pity party, but lost and said, I don't want anybody else to suffer through what I've suffered through, feeling like I've been cheated or feeling like people's votes were not accurately counted. Because us seeing Georgia flip blue in the presidential election means that Georgia can flip through on the governor. It can flip blue in the Congress. It can flip in whichever way we want it if the votes are actually counted. So she went to work in making sure that, okay, I ran for office to be of public service. And she has done more not winning the governorship than Brian Kemp has done as the governor.
Right.
So, and we talk about on this show all the time, titles and actual positions don't always mean that you are a leader. Leaders will lead no matter where they are politically, no matter what their, actual position or given title is. It comes out.
And that was definitely her. She I mean, actually, when you look at a lot of the organizations who have been doing a lot of work, around the country, it's not only, of course, it's not only in Georgia, but she went around like to the smaller parts of town, like just really understanding. I was watching several documentaries like throughout the summer too, on voter suppression, and just looking at how we spoke a little bit about it on Friday. Like in some towns, you were talking about how like Atlanta is the city, right? You can go outside of Atlanta and get to these places where it's like, oh, you have to go miles, for your next polling place, or like wherever is for you to go and register or to go and vote. And it's very inconvenient in a lot of places, and that's like that around America. Like we come from the city where a lot of things are convenient for us. You talked about, like access to internet and all of this stuff. It's not that easy for a lot of people, and sometimes we forget and we don't really think about those people and try to reach those people, and to really let their voices be heard. So I think that was very important. She thought about that. She made sure to go after those people and protect those people's rights too.
My thing is, a lot of the times, like us coming from the city, I would have never thought about other places in Georgia outside of Atlanta if it weren't for like me having cousins and friends who went to certain HBCUs in Georgia, like Fort Valley, like
Right.
Albany State, and they would tell me that like you got one time per day to get to Walmart, and you got to catch like a shuttle to take you down there. And if you miss the shuttle, there's really no way of getting back. And this is like
Correct.
2005, 2006. So there was no Uber. There are no taxis. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
there's not that much business for a taxi driver. So even little elements like that of if I don't have a car and I miss, the university shuttle, I might be stranded at the grocery store, at Walmart, right? Grocery store
Right.
and the mall, because that's pretty much the center of shopping and commerce and, livelihood in these small towns that we as,
Right.
big city folk don't think about. So
And
when you take that to other elements of your life, you're like, wow, that's very limiting.
right. And on top of that, like I remember going, I made a friend when I was volunteering for an organization in Atlanta, and they invited me down to their birthplace somewhere. It's somewhere in South Georgia. I know we drove past like Warner Robins and all that, and so it was like it was somewhere where it was super country seemed right. Like they had a Piggly Wiggly. It was my first time. I'd always heard about Piggly Wiggly, but it was my first time seeing one, and it was actually open. And I was like, wow, this place really exists. But it was like a small town, like no, like the buildings were like no more than 2 stories. It was just like my first time really seeing a small town, and it kind of blew me away. Like I'm from LA, like I'm from a big city, and then I get here and I'm learning while I'm there. It
Right.
was just so crazy. I'm learning while I was there that they just, like the previous year, they had just had their first integrated prom. This was around 2009, 2008, 2009. They had their first integrated prom. Like that, I was like, what? it was really like I stepped into another world. And just to think though, because being from a big city and just my interest always being like our history and just really invested in and seeing that we get to a better place. I'd always read about a lot of things and I always wondered though, I mean, even though I'm from LA, all of our families migrated from somewhere in the South, right? And so I know that we're not too far away from it, but I always wondered, like, for the people who are still there, because I'm like, I know the South is still concentrated with a lot of Black people. I'm wondering how they're functioning there. And you really think about, like, I know that a lot of the white folks who were not having it, like, they didn't, laws might change, but they want to be comfortable with their way of life. And I'm like, I know that everybody down there, especially in places like in Mississippi and, in South Georgia, especially, like in a lot of places, Alabama and stuff. I'm like, I know all them folks are not listening to the federal government. And I know that they're still trying to run stuff the way that they want to run it. Cause then later on, down the line, I'm learning about like people are still on plantations. People still basically like sharecropping and stuff. I'm like, we in the 2000s. You know what I mean? Like, I'm an adult at this point, and this is really happening. So I think about stuff like that. So when we fight for ourselves, I think we got to also think about people, think about reaching out to places that are like basically unseen, right, to the rest of the world. A lot of people don't hear about this stuff. So when we're fighting, like, it's not just for us. Think about how people have it, how bad people might have it in places where it's like they are keeping their same order of business. They have not, I'm sure people getting locked up for more ridiculous stuff, and people are never hearing about the cases. Like, so we got to, when we talk about justice, getting justice and all this stuff, we really have to keep a close eye on those places, on those hidden places.
And I think this is a time that even the energy around the world is shifting. Like, this is the Afrikan Social Activism Playbook, hosted by African Unity Initiative. And our whole goal is really promoting the progression of Black people around the African diaspora, Africans worldwide, right? And so as we are fighting for justice against police brutality here, there are people in Nigeria that are dealing with police brutality there. There are situations going on in other parts of the Caribbean and Africa. So I think that while we focused on our political power here, and the reason that we need to really grasp onto it is so that when it's time to have the full conversation about the African diaspora, we have something to offer as African Americans. We have that leverage here to say, this is the power that we can pull by, tugging on our government the same way we did. And here's a play, the same play that we did during apartheid, where we were in the midst of fighting for our own civil liberties here in the United States. We learned about what was happening during apartheid, and we said, we're not going to table that until after we finish. We're going to focus on it right now and pull it into what we're fighting for. I said all that to say, because I'm moving into our Monday morning quarterback, which is the Black agenda. And the Black agenda can't just be the Black American agenda, because it extends to us all. So, for example, I brought up police brutality, and in Nigeria, they're dealing with the SARS, right? And the conversation that has been heavily talked about when people are speaking about the Black agenda, and either party doing what they need to do for, the reparations of Black people in America, the descendants of those who were enslaved here. I don't think we can have the conversation about reparations and it's us first, and then we'll table everybody else's reparations. I think we are stronger when we are banded together, where if us as African Americans say we demand reparations, but not only for us, we demand reparations for Jamaica from England, for Haiti from France. And we're not only talking to the US government on our behalf, but how about put a coalition together of countries in the Caribbean that are fighting for their reparations for the transatlantic slave activities. Let's pull in the African Americans. Let's pull in the South Americans who are descendants of the transatlantic slave activities. And let's take it to the UN. Let's go beyond their head. Let's focus on it in our individual countries, but then also come together where we come together with a case and say, Europe owes us. They are in the position that they're in. If you go to the museum, if you look at the crown jewels of Great Britain, a lot of those are African jewels.
Right.
A lot of it is artifacts. A lot of their museums are filled with our historical artifacts that are still worth something. And then they make us pay a fee to go into their museum to see what we created.
Right.
So us coming around to this Black agenda extends beyond just the United States. And sometimes we get caught up, and I don't know what happened in this generation. Like, we spent an entire week talking about the history of Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism, and went all the way back until abolitionists speaking about Africa, right? So during
Right.
the time of enslavement, people who were born in America, who were both born enslaved and born Black and free in America, were still
Mhm.
identifying themselves as African. So I saw an article the other
Right.
day, or there was a question on some social media, was like, when did American born Black people start referring to themselves as African? And they posed the question like, was it when Jesse Jackson called us African Americans? Was it sometime
Mm.
before that? And you could tell that whoever posed that question didn't know about Paul Cuffey. They didn't know about
Right.
Martin Delaney.
Martin
They didn't know
Delaney and
about Denmark Vesey. They didn't know about David Walker, right? We're talking about the
right.
1700s. We're talking about the 1800s. Still, while we were in confinement, there are those of us who are free, there are those of us who are enslaved and abolitionists, still referring to ourselves as African. There are those of
Right.
us who are starting organizations with African in the title. So the real question should be, at what point did American born Black people stop referring to ourselves as
Stop.
African?
Mhm. Yeah. Exactly. I completely agree. And I think also, we talked about it before. Even remember Mariah Stewart also was one who, was referring to us as Africans and, naming organizations and things, Africans in America.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, it is easy now because that's the game, right? That's the trick, is divide and conquer. As long as you make them feel other, you make us feel like others, like not related to each
Right.
other. It's easier to keep us, keep a plan like us fighting for reparations as a whole, a global Black community. Now it's easy to be like, oh, well, well, that's their situation. Even, some of the responses, as sad as it can be, with some people feeling like they can take their personal experiences of, somebody like a bad experience with somebody, like, oh, well, they don't like us over here. Oh, well, they come over here and they're this and they're that, or we can't go over there. They, that's a whole nother world. And I think just that constant, that friction between us, like, it keeps us from moments like, of realizing that we can be stronger. We should be stronger together. I think we have to, like, we really do have a lot of work to do. And I don't want to say that it has to be so far away. I don't think so. I think just with more understanding, we can make it happen a lot sooner. So I don't want to put a time limit on it because, you don't want to underestimate how people can understand certain concepts. And so I think it comes with just with a clear understanding and just think about what our intentions are. And you brought up something very important, talking about coalitions. That's the exact same thing, right? Like, that's the exact thing that we're talking about, is learning how to join forces with people. And I think for African people, I mean, we are African people. You can take an apple seed and plant it on whatever continent you want to plant it on. It's still going to be an apple tree, right? It's not going to turn into grapes. It's not going to turn to strawberries. It's still going to be an apple. And so just realizing, recognizing that we are still African people, it'd
Exactly.
be, it makes sense for us to, just consider that relationship. But also, even within the situation that we are in now, in America, and it's a lot of division too, like even with between Black and Latino people. And I think we get a lot of mixed signals. Of course, based on personal relationships, personal experiences, and what we witnessed, and different things that we see and hear. But I think it's just a lot of stuff to clear up, because I know that we share a lot more things in common with our Latin brothers and sisters than Latino brothers and sisters than we do differences. And I think we just have to find more common grounds too, and just not be swayed by the false information that's put out there.
But the thing is, we have to learn. So we need other news sources. We need other sources to get and gather information, because what we know now is that the 24-hour news cycle, that invention of 24-hour news that CNN started, they needed something to fill those 24 hours with. And in America, they don't sell information, they sell fear.
Right.
It's either like in entertainment, it's going to be selling sex and violence, and then you have selling fear in entertainment. But the news, the way they make money, the way they keep advertisers, the way they keep people tuning back in, we have a breaking story and we're going to tell you after the break. So they keep you waiting to hear what this craziness is going to be. They got you sitting through the whole commercial break, because that's how they stay on the air. And then they sell you the fear, and they give you a snippet of it. And then they make you watch a whole 2-hour news program just to get 5 minutes of a story. And, they break it into blocks. It's marketing. So if they're marketing you and they're selling you, are they actually giving you accurate information? Most of the time they're not. And they don't have any interest in actually being unbiased and giving you all sides. They want you to be in an echo chamber. And echo chambers are dangerous. But one of the most important parts about having a real Black agenda is creating our own narrative. One of the best parts, or the most important elements of creating your own narrative, is first your name. How do you identify yourself? Are we still calling ourselves by names given to us by other people? So, we have a lot of people talking about reparations, like I said, talking about justice and police reform and all these things, and gentrification in the Black community. These are 3 issues that I see plaguing the Black community.
Right.
No real resolution to our history of enslavement and all the other things, whether it be Jim Crow all the way down to present, of the atrocities that have befallen Black people. No real mention of any type of plan to give us anything for that. No real plan toward community policing and solving that interaction, and no plan against gentrification. But again, when you broaden your scope as a Black person and you see yourself as a global African, you see that those same issues are plaguing Black Jamaicans, Black Ghanaians, Black Martinicans, Black Haitians, Black Peruvians, Black Mexicans. And then you start to say, wow, we could actually do something better. When I am hearing about some atrocity that's going on with Black people in Mexico, I'm going to post that. I'm going to research it. I'm going to participate. I'm going to donate. There are so many things that we can do. We can do a lot remotely. We can join the fight in person and simultaneously fight for our, you know, country or whatever place we reside and fight with the same fervor. And actually, when
Right.
you know that other people have your back, when I know that my issue isn't just an Atlanta issue, but people in Chicago
Mhm.
care about what's happening in Atlanta. When I know that
Exactly.
people in Lagos care about what's happening in Chicago. When I know that people in, you know, Bo, Sierra Leone care about what's going on in Lagos, then it gives me a battery in my back to keep moving because I know people are
Mhm.
behind me. I'm
Right.
that much more encouraged. I mean,
Mhm.
it only makes sense.
But I
Everybody
wonder
is
though.
ready for war when they got their army with them.
Right. Exactly. That's what makes sense. I think this is maybe one of those common sense um conversations, or just something that maybe we think about it if it's if something like that is already on our brain, because I don't think it's so common. A lot of times we just think about, even when you think about individual issues, when it comes to depression or when it comes to just parenthood, not being sure, a lot of different things, right? People take it on to where it's like it's this personal thing. You just carry this burden like all by yourself, instead of thinking, okay, well, maybe join the coalition, or maybe think about a group who is already meeting about the same topic, and maybe it could help me, right? I'm not the only one going through it. I think it is very common for a lot of us to just take it on by ourselves, or just really look at it like, oh my God, this is just so horrible. I think a lot of us, especially when it comes to Black struggle, and we know that Black struggle is global. It is not only us in America. It's not only happening in Africa, where there are, majority Africans. It's not only happening, in all of these other places. We have to think about,
Right.
like, you know that there are other people going through the same thing at the same time. And so it would make sense, that the whole thing about strength in numbers, and just seeing maybe how other people are dealing with it, it can inspire, and motivate you to do things differently, or to keep going, like whatever kind of motivation that you need. I think we all just need to think about something like that, of joining forces. We don't have to be by ourselves, because I think also when we isolate ourselves, or just isolate this whole situation, especially dealing with Black struggle, we think about, oh well, I think it's easier for people to be like, well, this is just how it's supposed to be. It is what it is. And that's the absolute wrong position to have, which I feel that when it comes to voting, when it comes to, actually being active in the struggle, when we some of us actually want solutions, whereas a lot of us already feel doomed. We already feel like, oh well, this is just how it is. You know how these people are. It is, this is just how the Constitution is just against us, and that's how it's going to be. No, it doesn't have to stay that way. We actually, some of us see the way out, and we are going for the door. We're not trying to just stay here, and just be sad, and or just deal with it, or like it is what it is. No, it's not. It is. This is how it is, but that's not how it's going to stay. So there are actions that we can take, get ourselves out of these situations, out of these positions.
One of the things that you just mentioned depression as you were talking, and you were like, even when it comes to personal issues like depression, one of the worst things that can happen to a depressed person is isolation, feeling,
Right.
because then your problems seem to mount, and they become that much larger to you because you feel like I'm the only person that's dealing with this. And even one
Mm-hmm.
on one therapy sometimes isn't the best remedy. It's group therapy. It's
Yep.
being in a room with other people who are going through what you're going through so you can put your life in perspective. Oh,
Right.
I'm not the only person. Oh, I can relate to these other people
Right.
can who can empathize, truly empathize with how I'm feeling. So now I'm more encouraged. I'm not going to take my life because I see that it's worth living, or I'm encouraged by this person's story who, after I look at what
Right.
they've gone through and what I've gone through, I know I can make it if they did. The same
Mm-hmm.
concept of the African diaspora, when we
Exactly.
isolate ourselves in our own little holes, and I'm African American, I'm Nigerian,
Mm-hmm.
I'm Haitian, I'm this, I'm that, and you are other, and our problems are
Right.
this, then we stay
Right.
in the same place, and we are, you know, figuratively committing suicide by isolating
Mm-hmm.
ourselves in our own problems, believing that we are the only populace going through this. But when you know
Exactly.
that, oh, they've gone through that, so the transatlantic slave trade negatively impacted Africa as well. Oh, so it did this, it left a gap. There was a knowledge gap, because what a lot of people don't know is that they didn't enslave unknowledgeable people,
Right.
they enslaved the experts. So if you take a whole generation, generations, as a matter of fact, of the experts, of the the people who were the architects and the agriculturalists and all of the geniuses and the smart people out of a place, there is a brain drain that happens. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not because the people who were left were unintelligent, but they intentionally left the apprentices and took the masters. They took the person who was
Right.
the master at their craft and left the apprentice before they had ended training. So now you have these Europeans who've learned the expertise from the African that they've
Mm-hmm.
enslaved, and then go back to the continent of Africa, reintroduce it as if it was their information. So the African
Right.
believes that, oh, we've learned this information from Europe. So now we trust white people's word over people who come from our own country, or a person that
Right.
looks like me. So they went through the same type of conditioning, except the example is we were kidnapped and, trapped in someone's basement, and somebody ran up in their house and held them hostage in their own home.
Right.
Pretty much identical situations, though. So the impact on Africa was the same economically, culturally. They still had their language, they still had some elements, but they did lose a lot. So when we look at the
Right.
thing as the whole picture of what us being drained out of Africa did, our ancestors, we have shared ancestors. That's just logical. And like you
Mm-hmm.
said, it's common sense, but they often say common sense isn't common.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, if you think about it for more than 3 seconds, it makes sense to you. But if you're just
Right.
being fed information about who doesn't like what and who was the cause of this, then you are buying into the separation tactics. It's the oldest art of war in the world. Divide, conquer.
Exactly. And so we got to not fall for it. And that's so how do we overcome this, right? Like I because I am we are about action. We you and I, right? Like we have an interest and we got a degree in it. Like, you know what I mean? Like we serious about our people and about just our situation, overcoming these situations. And we're not the first to do it, right? We're inspired by people who came before us and got us to this point that we're at now. Like this wasn't easy to get to. A lot of people now could be very ungrateful and be like, well, where are we? Where did this end us? You don't want to be where our ancestors were, where our elders, just a couple generations ago. You don't want to be where they were.
Right.
So, we just have to realize, that it's always our responsibility to move up, right? We have to move up a notch, a few steps, and just run. We, especially as the younger, when you think about younger people, right? We usually have the more energy. We have more energy. We're in better shape, able to take that baton and just take it up a notch. And we really have to just make sure not to drop the ball. And so I think about when we talk about solutions, or like, where do we go from here? What do we do now?
So
I think it's not for a lot of people, and that they don't have to have the intention to not do anything, or they don't have to be necessarily like feeling like they don't want to do anything, but a lot of people just don't understand that they can do a lot more than they're actually doing. And so I was looking at organizations and things like, because activism can look a lot of different, it can look like a lot of different things. And so there are organizations like the Breathe Act is a bill that they're trying to get passed. It's by Alicia Garza, though, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. And I mean, they have a black contract, right? A contract for Black people to present um, to Congress, and get all that passed in Congress and stuff. But on that website, if you go to breatheact.org, um, they have like a list of actions, like things that you can do, right? They got things like it's some campaigns where it's like you can share, if you want to share your story of, if you experience police brutality or something, you want to share your story, just add the hashtag in your story, to bring awareness to certain situations. Bringing awareness is a form of activism, right? Like that's something that you can do. You can be working 2 or 3 jobs. You scrolling on social media, you can do something, right? There is something for all of us to do. Just like you said, like what we like to do is give a few dollars, donate to different causes. There are people who are out there doing the hard work to where you don't have to do the research. You don't have to be the one reading books and going to the library and doing all of this stuff. There are simple things that a lot of us can be doing, and with the access and the convenience that we have of 2020, we are in a different position to where we should be doing a whole lot more than what a lot of us are doing. I think it's just because we don't know what we can do and how easy having a hand in it, can actually be.
yep. And that's so I put breatheact.org on the screen. So if you guys want to go to the site, please go look over the actions that can be taken. But you asked the question and you gave some of the answers. But I think the main play is what we've spoken about so often. It's the apartheid play. This is the play that we're running. This is how we get this
Yes.
done. It's the African independence movement. Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo
Right.
Kenyatta went to school in the United States, got inspired by the activism during the Black freedom struggle over here in the 60s and 70s. And they went, no, in the 50s and 60s, and they went home and started the independence movements across Africa. I'm talking about it started with Ghana and then it trickled down to every country started saying so. Africans were influenced by African Americans. Then one African so-called country got independence. It was like the other African countries saw it and was like, oh, that's possible. Let's start.
Right.
Then it started to trickle
Right.
down to where right now on paper, every African country is sovereign on paper. Now, in reality,
Right.
that's another thing. But the important point to take away from that is the inspiration trickled because the ideas were not isolated, because they allowed themselves to partner and be influenced by their brothers and sisters globally.
Right.
This was a manifestation of wow, with their support, we can overcome what's holding us back. We can take off the shackles of these people who technically own our land, they own our resources, and we are enslaved to them. Like, think about that colonization. Your home country doesn't belong to you.
Right.
And the inspiration of that movement was sparked by the African diaspora. That is the play. It has always been the play. It always will be the play. Like, that is the major play. It's just, first of all, let's not be isolated. Let's also vote in your national elections, in your municipal elections, in your state elections, in your however your government is broken down. But then let's also come together beyond those borders and present cases to the UN, present cases to the World Bank, present cases to bodies that preside over these countries that supersede just one national legal, binding contract. Because the Geneva Convention is upheld by the UN. So you can't commit war crimes and you can't do this and this in, international, what do they call it? Intercontinental affairs. That's when they step in. That wasn't just one country saying, I'm going to go to my country and try to get human rights to be activated. In terms of human rights being enacted, you have to go beyond just your national borders, beyond your allegiance to one nation. Our identity, first and foremost, is African. Does not belong to any particular nation. Our citizenship to any nation on this planet is on paper. That does not qualify our ethnicity. It does not qualify our identity. So that's one of the things that we have to do. Controlling our narrative. One of the largest things, and I'm going to say it again, on making sure that a Black agenda is actually done is creating our own narrative, telling our own stories. In order to do that, we have to at least name ourselves. That's the least that we can do, and not have someone else determine our allegiance.
Right. You know what I'm interested in seeing? The day that comes when even a lot of different countries, especially in Africa, start to draw their own lines. Like, when we think about it, like, we're still going by the names that Europeans gave them, right? Of the countries, and labeled them and divided them. You got people across borders. You're part of the same ethnicity, and these folks came in your territory and divide you up, and then named you, stuck a name to you, right? And I think, because it's something to do with human nature, how we attach ourselves to these names and flags and different symbols and all kind of stuff like that. It might take a little time, but I think it's still something to look forward to. I think it's something very important, because that is something, when we talk about identity, that's your foundation, right? Who I call myself, how I label myself, because we still, you can get so far in your own individual success, but when you look at it, the foundation, like, have you defined yourself? Have you defined, everything that you're about and named yourself? Those are very important things. But you talked about, like some coalitions and contracts, and just having your own agenda and being ready, being prepared to present that. And just something very on, we talked about, like, the Congressional Black Caucus, who, some of the one of the first members of people, one of the first founders was Shirley Chisholm. And so we talked about her before, of course. And people, she walks so Kamala can fly, and I think when we look at them, well, I know when we look at them, they helped to the CBC helped to found organizations like the Trans-Africa organization and the anti-apartheid movement and things like that, that got the ball rolling on things like that. And actually, I just saw a clip of Joe Biden speaking on it when he was, I think he was speaking to Congress, and he was talking passionately about, about America moving on them in South Africa, and helping them, in apartheid. But anyway, that's sidetracked right now. But still, it was the same idea, right? And even when they broke off and decided to this coalition, well, against amongst Black caucus members, Black congressional members or whatever, they formed the Black caucus, and Nixon didn't even want to meet with them, right? But they went and started their own. They started reporting on, by themselves. They had their own like press conference and stuff like that, and they finally met with him. And when they met with him, they presented him with a 32-page document saying these are things that we need to improve our situation for our community, right? They went there prepared. You had to go there. They went there with the intention of knowing who they were, knowing that they were not just stepping in there to melt into the pot and just be, just become Democrats and like, we're just American politicians. No, they went in there like, we are Black Americans. We have interest for the Black American community, right? And so these are things we need done. They were very intentional about the things that they were doing. And so they went in there prepared. And that's the same thing that we were talking about. We spoke about Cube very early on, brother. We spoke about Ice Cube and his contract with Black America. And somehow, some way, people still got confused about it. But, but I mean, it's a lot of people though, more than Ice Cube, more than Black Lives Matter, and more than the Congressional Black Caucus. There are a lot of people actually who are getting things, thinking about having a plan and stuff. We need things to get passed, and that's the importance of we were talking about this recent election, and what's coming up in Georgia is the Senate race in January, where we need a Democratic Senate, right? Democratic majority in the Senate, so that things can actually pass. It would mean nothing if we are still not involved and get that majority in the Senate. So our work is definitely not done.
Yep. Our work is not done on the part of us voting. And then once we get that, we have to hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
We as Black people won this election for them because,
right.
And I said this on Friday, I saw these memes and all of these statements on social media was like, poor white people saw Donald Trump lie, not hold up to political promises, and do all types of dirt, bring the country into a pandemic, and Joe Biden still won by the grit of his teeth. We had to, pray that a lot of these. Did you see how many red states there still were?
I was blown away, really. I mean, I'm like, I know that it was
all that comes to no surprise for me.
It was, I know, like it was not I was shocked. Not okay, shocked is not the word.
I know what country I was born in.
Exactly. Like, so that's the thing. I knew what America was and who was in America. I knew that it was not that. I've been saying all along, they will not let this go easily. Even for the people who, a lot of them want to consider themselves, they don't have to feel like they're racist or, and things like that. They don't have to necessarily be, I don't even think every one of them have to be against Black people or against any other so-called minority in America. They just will not let that go easily. And it's like, when you think about it, I think it's the combination of like the fear of not knowing what's going to happen, like if they finally lose control, that the same things that they've done to other people, that it'll happen to them. I think it's a combination of that, and of probably some of them feeling like they can't be the ones to drop the ball. Like their ancestors have this legacy, right? They have this. How would they would be like the weakest link in the chain, right? If they just let America go, like not majority white anymore, not like white rule, that mindset. And so I mean, I don't know. I think it's a lot of different factors. I can't even name all of them as racist. I mean, I don't know everybody, so I don't know everybody's intentions and stuff like that. We can generalize in a lot of different ways, but just seeing the values, though, you can't support somebody like Trump and still be like, oh well, like, no, sorry, you get thrown in that box over there, because he's a despicable human. Like, you just can't support somebody like him.
And the thing that we have to remember, racism is systemic. It's not personal. It's not individuals. It's about supporting your claim to access to power, access to, information, access to wealth, quality of living. And it's just limiting people to those things based on physical attributes. That's all racism is. So you can be the nicest, most, kind person, but you don't want to give up those. You are supporting racism. That's what that is. There's really no way around that. So the thing is, my point in bringing that up is we have to vote, and we have to take it seriously, because it does matter. You saw how many red states there still were in the midst of incompetence. Then you also saw Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia flip, which means that your vote has merit. It has power. It does get counted, and it can switch around some results. So when it comes to the Senate and the House of Representatives, the body of Congress, the president needs their support to get certain bills passed. So we need a flexible, amenable Congress to make sure that when we present our contracts with Black America, our Black agenda, our proposals for certain bills and acts and policies to be passed, that we don't have to deal with months of stalling, and then Congress going on recess, and then months of filibustering, and then another recess before the bill is even brought to the table. Not even talking about voting on the bill yet. Not even talking about vetoes of the bill. Just talking about having the bill be presented. There are preventative tactics in this American political system that can prevent bills from even being brought to the floor. So if you have a Congress that's moldable, that we can actually hold accountable, then it doesn't mean our job is over. It means that our job is just beginning, and we can actually do our job. This is why we're excited. I'm not excited about the win because of who won. The individuals particularly.
It's not about the candidates.
I'm excited because the individuals particularly can be held accountable to do what we are demanding. Exactly. So that's my whole thing with all of this right now. We have to make sure that we vote and we use these political powers and our constituency to vote to get in the people that we want in. But remember, the reason that we want them in is not because of what they just are going to magically do for us, because they are creating the agenda with us in mind. We
Mm-hmm.
create the agenda for us. We demand that they listen to it and accommodate us.
And
We come in with the
did we
demands,
not talk?
and we're gonna keep saying this,
Yeah, did,
and I can't wait to hear it somewhere else. We're the puppeteers, they are the puppets.
yeah, right. Didn't we talk about a lot earlier how even about the crime bill when we talk about Joe Biden, talking about the candidate, the person, because a lot of people are criticizing them. They of course weren't even our first picks at all. Like they weren't on radar at all. Like I'm like, oh no, out of all the people that were running early on, they were the least progressive people on here
Second,
pretty much.
third.
And so yeah, so I'm like, they weren't even in my scope. But at the same time, we got to look at who we got stuck with, right? And so this is I saw a lot of positions that people took where but really the only other thing was like not voting and using the excuse, well, I don't want to say excuse, but it is a move to say, like I will abstain from voting, but that doesn't make sense when this is your only choice, right? Like if it's something where it's like it wasn't going to affect you either way, there was
Bad
no
logic.
way that it was going to be, yeah, no. So that, that one was out of the door. But I think we have to look at who we are with now. We have a new president-elect and vice-president-elect, and look at their records and just think about. I don't think we should keep focusing on stuff from the 80s and stuff like that. Like, but look at like not focusing, not stuck on it, but of course keeping that in mind and holding them accountable to correct the things that they have done wrong, right? That we feel that they have done wrong to negatively affect them. Of course, we have to think about that and we're holding them accountable. Now, but
Exactly.
look at, we talked about before voting began, and we talked about the crime bill. We talked about Joe Biden and the crime bill and the fact that it wasn't just white folks. It wasn't just him. He didn't do the crime bill all alone. Like he didn't land all black people, a lot of our black people in jail and stuff on his own. A lot of people voted for him, including you know what I mean? Like a lot of our black politicians, black people, black voters, because they were in a particular situation where they needed something to be done. I know that where we messed up with that, where they messed up with, because I obviously wasn't of age then, but where they messed up was not presenting black people, not presenting a bill that they would make sure wouldn't negatively affect them like that, right? Like what should have happened was black people saying, okay, let's gather this, let's write this bill up
Yep.
and then present it to who we need to present it to. Instead, there was a person outside our community who wrote this bill. Of course, they're not thinking about all the other stuff of how it's going to affect us. They're not even a part of our community. So we have to think about stuff like that ahead of time. We are not supposed to sit there and wait for them. Oh, well, you're the politician. Oh, you do it. You're in charge. We're giving them the strings. We're supposed to be the ones that's pulling the strings. And so I think that's where that was the biggest mistake. So if we're going to criticize just, Joe Biden on that, like we can't just
Yep.
criticize just only him on that. We have to understand where we went wrong and make sure not that mistake again. But it doesn't make sense to stay stuck on that when you're not even putting it in context. So I think that's the big thing that we're not doing. Even criticizing Joe Biden. This is who we with right now, okay? And this will be the more, like you said, the more moldable person of people to work with in government. We can't. Trump was just not. That was not. He was. We already know what he was about. We have to learn to understand who people are when they tell us who they are, and we already know that was not going to work with him. But this is an administration that we will be able to work with more.
Right.
I really believe that. Yeah. So, but yeah, we got to put stuff in a context. Don't cherry pick information and talk about what this and that you don't like about it or about that person without putting it into context.
And like you just said, putting this into context, staying on the crime bill, this is what happens when we allow the puppet to just run rampant. We allow the puppet to just, create the agenda for us. That's what it looks like. It
Right.
looks like that
Right.
crime bill because
Right.
they're saying, okay, you guys are complaining about crime in the community. And there was real crime happening to regular, everyday citizens that was happening in the Black community. And,
Mm-hmm.
people actually feared for their lives. And that was a real concern. And the thing is, the politicians did what we asked them to do. They came up with a plan to stop the crime. It just so happens that they 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 didn't really care about the specifics of the community and
Mm-hmm.
the other lives that would be impacted and how to actually delicately do this.
Right. The
They
long lasting
criminalized
effect.
and went punitive over every little thing. And what did it do?
Mm-hmm.
It lowered the crime rate.
Right.
But I'm
It
saying
did.
it
Right.
did what we initially asked them to do. But that's what happens when you ask somebody else to do your agenda for you. They're not going to take
Exactly.
all things into consideration. So that is up
Exactly.
to us. We have to say, okay, yeah, there is a drug problem that we did not create in our community. We we as Black people in Compton, we as Black people in Harlem, we as Black people in Bankhead have not gone to Columbia. You know what I mean? We're not at the ports taking the coca leaves off the boat, but some kind of way it's magically ending up in our neighborhoods, and our
Right.
children and nieces and nephews are being hooked on this, and these things are penetrating our community magically again. Like how does it just magically get into the local drug dealer's hand? Who do they know? They
Right.
probably and we talking
Right.
about in the late 80s and in the 90s. People weren't like bilingual. You know what I mean? Like the drug dealer in on Hollywood Road in Bankhead didn't speak Spanish. So how does he get the package? How is he getting this re-up? All of these questions have to be answered. So these are elements that we as a Black person would think about in that agenda. Yes, there's crime, but a lot of it is drug related. A lot of it is drug addicts that are sick, where
Mm.
you see how they're treating the opioid epidemic. It's
That's.
not
I was just about to
criminalized.
say that.
It's
Mm-hmm.
about counseling these people to a cure. It's called a disease. These people are sick.
Right.
But the difference is it's not only because it's white people being affected, it's because the white people who are being affected are the ones who are creating the agenda. It's not coming directly from the politicians. It's coming from white families in suburbia whose children are hooked on meth. If I and my parents and their cohorts in the late 80s and early 90s said, we as the parents of the crackhead, we as the uncles and aunties and the grandparents of my my offspring who is addicted to these drugs, and we see it as a sickness, and we demand that it be put into law in that way. So if you put them into counseling, does that also decrease the crime rate? Yes.
Right. Right.
But we have to go into it with those types of with those types of solutions in mind. They're not going
Yeah.
to do it for us. They're not going to relate to it like we can.
Right.
But
And
now we
then you
see what
and
the
just
plays are.
on
So back
yeah,
to the
and on
original
top of
point,
that though,
create our own
yeah.
agenda and feed it to them.
Hmm. On top of that though, like we already just understanding our history, our position in the society, we're not like a favorite, right? We're gonna be if you give them the opportunity. It's like we literally hand them over Like they're not gonna. You sit up there and you ask them for help, and you already know we're enemy of the state. Why would you expect them to give us something good? You don't ever like. Why would we even think to? Oh, let me put this in your hands. Oh, a chance to criminalize them. Oh, we got that. We got y'all. We okay. You want to see a decrease in crime? Let's lock them up. Lock them up. And of course, because people were desperate, they were in a position to where they needed something to be done about it. And who do you look to handle that? When it's out of hand, you look to the government, who's supposed to be, handling stuff like that, like on a larger level and at a higher level. And I think, allowing ourselves to get in a position to where we'll be vulnerable like that, like we have to be aware, just be really aware of what's going on and what are we getting ourselves into. So that should be a learning experience for us. I don't think we that happen again because when you listen to a lot of the talks now, people who are actually a lot of our politicians and organizers, they are very intentional when we're talking about police reform or defund the police, and a lot of like they are thinking about the consequences, the negative consequences of the crime bill and other legislation that negatively impacted us, and that's the thing that I was saying before, is that I wouldn't necessarily put that on them to say, well, that was everybody's intention, because all the Black people who voted on that, because they presented it, right? But people had to vote on that and they got that passed, right? Because people were desperate. They wanted something to be done in their communities. People went for that. That's what they wanted because it was a solution for them. They didn't know the outcome of that. They didn't know that for generations their families would be suffering, right? So we got to think about just like it doesn't have their intention, but we still want to go back and correct what was done wrong. And so that is what's being happened. I'm seeing a lot of discussion. I was reading some different documents. It is in a lot of, like, even in I believe it was in the Contract with Black America, Ice Cube's thing, where he directly addressed that, of correcting things that was actually set in place by the crime bill, and and other things that were put into place that continue to harm our community. So I mean, we just got to be wiser going forward.
Yep. And that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with learning lessons from
Mm-hmm.
errors from the past. That's why we look to the past to learn from the correct things that they did, which is what the social activism playbook is, us drawing from plays that were successful. But we can also do the Monday morning quarterback and look at what, what caused that fumble, what caused that intersection, what was the breakdown in the play where, the blocking was off? Why did my shot get blocked? Why did the ball get stolen? Whatever sport you want to go
Right.
to, you look at
Right.
the mistakes that were made too, to correct them, to make better plays, to say, okay, if I dribble the ball on my left side against a right-handed player, I have a better advantage to get past them because I'm on their weak side being strong, whatever. But you see these elements. Oh, the crime bill
Right.
was us depending on them to create an agenda for
Mm-hmm.
us. Now we are doing our own agenda and presenting it to them. Oh, that's how it should
Exactly.
have been done from the beginning. Okay,
Exactly.
got you. And then we move on and we learn from both success and failure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we continue. So, like we said, this entire week is dedicated to, okay, the Democrats have won. They seem to be winning. What now? As Black people, as African people, what are we doing about it? So, you know, I'm here. Michelee and I are going to be here, and I'm about to put your information up on the screen. So start telling the people where to find you, and we're going to get right back to it tomorrow morning.
Oh yeah, so you can find me on my website at mishmashworld.com with my handmade merchandise, and my Instagram to go along with that is mishmash world, mishmash underscore world on IG. So that's where you can find me. Tell people where we can find more about African Unity Initiative.
Yep. And you can find us on all social media sites, even YouTube, at African Unity. Please like, comment, share, subscribe this video and all of our videos to all of your social media. If you're watching this, let other people know, because we want to be proactive. We want to give out the actual plays of what we need to do. Please visit www.africanunity.us for more information on how to get involved with the organization as a whole, so that you can see the communities that we work in. You can see the actual work we're doing on the ground in Haiti, in Uganda, in Sierra Leone, in Atlanta, in New York, in Peru, and all these other places where we focus on building a bridge across the African diaspora, ending this crazy isolation that we have been indoctrinated to present to ourselves, and to really hold ourselves at bay, just pretty much primed for their exploitation. So we have to
Right.
stop that. So please check us out. We love you guys. We're going to be here every morning. ASAP is coming to you 5 days a week now, Monday through Friday. Check out African Unity Initiative on YouTube for all of our other podcasts and shows that we do as well. We really do love you guys.